Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We are in the drum tap section, and we turn now to a little gem of a poem. Some of the people that just kind of pass through some of these lesser known poems are really missing, I think, a great gift. In this case, this is the poem called Reconciliation, poem number 34 of the 43 of drum taps. We're nearing the end of drum taps, and as we've said already in earlier lectures, there is just a series of these short little vignettes, and I find this just one of the more compelling little poems. I want to remind you, and this is significant for this study, that early on in Leaves of Grass, in a little poem called To the Old Cause, Whitman said, "My book and the war are one." And in every one of these poems that we've been dealing with from drum taps, we've been asking the question, how does that actually work? Here we're going to see it again, because, well, after the war ends, and of course the death of Lincoln that we'll get to with Memories of Lincoln here in a little bit, there is this powerful moment in American history, which I think often is overlooked. The ability for what our word here is, reconciliation. Now what's fascinating about this little poem is that the word reconciliation never actually gets used in the poem, and never in any other poem in Leaves of Grass. And yet, as we have argued, if Leaves of Grass is a sustained theodicy to explain the pain and suffering of the world, especially the pain and suffering of America, then I think this word is a compelling word that sits right at the end of drum taps. Now our assumption is that you've been with us at LearnStrong.net all the way from the very beginning. We have given a set of introductory comments to drum taps, and then we just finished with Look Down, Fair Moon. Now our Nortons, as we like to reference it, will give us this background information. This justly famous poem was first printed in the sequel to drum taps, 1865-66, and remained unchanged except for the exclusion in 1881 of the pronoun I opening the last line. In some ways, some have argued that this is one of the first modern war poems because it does seek to try to answer the question, what happens after the war? Let's look at it now and just be blown away by the fact that this is a single sentence, brilliantly constructed poem. Word over all, beautiful as the sky, beautiful that war and all its deeds of carnage must in time be utterly lost. That the hands of the sisters, death and night, incessantly, softly wash again and ever again this soiled world. For my enemy is dead. A man divine as myself is dead. I look where he lies, white-faced and still in the coffin. I draw near, bend down, and touch lightly with my lips the white face in the coffin. Now, I'm sorry, but there are few poems in Leaves of Grass that are as compelling as this little poem, and remarkably philosophic. Notice we begin with logos. We begin with the word, which is used again and again all the way through Leaves of Grass. Can I as well interest you in, depending on how you count it, but the 11th word of Leaves of Grass in the very first inscription's poem, Oneself I Sing. Do you remember it? Oneself I sing, a simple separate person, yet utter the word, democratic, the word en masse. In the first two lines of Leaves of Grass, the word gets used twice. And notice that right here, words are going to be important, but ultimately it's more about the kiss. And of course, standing, I believe, behind this poem is the great kiss of the New Testament, and we'll get to it in a moment. Of course, that's the Judas kiss of Matthew 26:47. We'll have more to say about it. Notice, word over all, that is to say, reconciliation, while never used in any poem in Leaves of Grass, serves as a beautiful title. In other words, coming to terms with, to reconcile. Overall, and then notice, beautiful as the sky is I mean, it's an expansive and a beautiful simile that speaks to the power of Whitman's really laconic language. Beautiful as the sky, word overall, beautiful as the sky. And then the repetition of the word beautiful. Beautiful that war and all its deeds. Now I'm sorry, but this just catches readers. If you've been reading from that very first word come at the very beginning, the invitation word of Leaves of Grass with us, and you've been working all the way up to now, you have worked through some very difficult poetry in drum taps. There is no question about it. How in heaven's name can we look at some of those poems like Woundresser and others and use the word beautiful? And yet here it is. That war and all its deeds, we think of our Goethe's Faust with a word like this, deeds, of carnage, right, must in time be utterly lost. Now, obviously, this is going to lead to all kinds of questions regarding Whitman's theodicy. Is it possible that all of the events can ultimately be utterly lost? And what is Whitman arguing? Is he saying that in the end it's all forgotten? Which many have argued today. I've had a few of you that have commented, picking up Leaves of Grass and Drum Taps is forcing me to have to go back and think about the American Civil War, something I've really not thought very much about. What was Gettysburg and Chancellorsville and all of the other horrors of the war? What was that actually like? Here, notice he says in the end it's going to be all utterly lost, utterly forgotten. We think of Marcus Aurelius as soon you will have forgotten all things and all things will have forgotten you. Utterly lost. What else is beautiful? Notice the second that the hands of the sisters, notice capitalized, death and night, incessantly, softly wash again and ever again this soiled world. Now, I think that Whitman's audience would more easily pick up on what really is happening here. Think of the power of the kiss of Judas as an act of betrayal. And of course, Pilate just a few moments later will wash his hands. And notice how Whitman will take, again, as we said, Whitman thinks of Leaves of Grass as the New American Bible. He'll take that story and he'll switch it, he'll adjust it in some brilliant way. Notice, the hands of the sisters, death and night, clearly. Those are two words that work very well with the American Civil War. Incessantly, softly, wash again and ever again. In other words, it will be repeated and again and again. This soiled world. Now, can we just point out the use of the word soiled in a collection of poems called Leaves of Grass? It's brilliant. And it takes us obviously back to Song of Myself 6, and the idea of soiled as being both of the earth as well as destroyed in some way. And obviously we think of our Milton in Paradise Lost as well. I think, guys, Whitman is on his game in a poem like this. Notice that the hands of the sisters, death and night, incessantly, softly wash again and ever again this soiled world. Now we got two that's, and then we go to the four. For my enemy is dead. Now, it's such a laconic line, such a powerful line. My enemy is dead. And you would think that that would mean like, yay, it's something to celebrate. But notice the gentleness with which Whitman is able to play this game. Again, we know that he served in the hospitals a whole lot of Confederate soldiers and is accorded to have been as gentle with them as he was with the Union soldiers. For my enemy is dead, notice the comma, a man divine as myself is dead. Now, this is a controversial line. It certainly was controversial when Whitman published this poem. Wait. First of all, divine and all of the Christ-like elements of kissing that will happen here in a little bit are a part of this. No question about that. But to argue that a Confederate soldier is divine, that is compelling. And of course, it takes us back to any number of other sets of lines in Leaves of Grass. I mean, I'm thinking now of just Song of Myself, passage 48, as he will speak about both the body and the soul being of co-equal importance. For my enemy is dead, a man divine as myself is dead. Notice the repetition. I look, and it's interesting to point out the ways in which this phraseology, both literal and implied, is constant through Leaves of Grass, but especially in Drum Taps. I mean, guys, think about now as we're finishing Drum Taps, see, we'll begin to make some of these kind of summative comments about Drum Taps. It's an amazing collection of poems. So these 43 poems are just really compelling poems of Leaves of Grass. And yet, notice how constantly we're being forced as readers to look. If great poets show instead of tell, we've been looking through the eyes constantly, again and again, of Whitman. I look where he lies, white-faced. Go back to that lily reference in March in the Ranks Hard Pressed. White-faced and still in the coffin. I think that Whitman is brilliant at using the word still. I think that T.S. Eliot learned how to use this word. He must be still and still moving into another intensity, right, and all of that. Still in the coffin, then the dash, I draw near. And truly, because of the way that he can play this game with language, it's not just he that draws near, but now we also as readers draw near. We're onlookers to this beautifully crafted scene. There in the coffin is the enemy, is the one that's responsible for all the death and the carnage that Whitman constantly was witnessing in the hospitals. And he draws near. Bend down. Notice just the brief language, the brilliance of this set of lines. Bend down and touch lightly with my lips the white face in the coffin. Now, I find again the use of the word lily in an earlier poem to reference a dying soldier's face, and here, notice, we come back to it again. This is a poem of obvious dynamic hope and at the same time pathos, tremendous pathos. What are we going to do with a poem like this at 2A? Well, I think one of the powerful messages of this poem is that in the end, the only response to the Civil War is forgiveness and reconciliation. It's the only way that in the end, there must be the willingness to leave, to transcend and include, to use the language of Ken Wilber and the Integralists. That is to say, yes, the war was horrific. Gettysburg and all of the other horrors of the war was horrific, and yet the only response, notice we're coming to the end of Drum Taps, the only response that is worthy is a kiss. It's quite compelling. It to be, notice this is a single sentence. I mean, using punctuation to make it so, but it's quite a brilliantly crafted little poem. The tightness of the lines is in fact just brilliant. Notice the word reconciliation, never used in the poem, but is set up as being the word of all words. And how do you want to end Drum Taps? Well, here it is, the reconciliation. And it obviously takes us at any number of places, obviously, to Lincoln's great speech in which he argued about better angels and the idea that we have to be willing to move beyond. Obviously, there's any number of speeches that come to mind for Lincoln. Obviously, Gettysburg Address is as well. But I want to concentrate on the biblical allusions and references that are being made here. We mentioned the Matthew 26 passage as well as the Mark 14 passage. The kiss of Judas is obviously being replayed here. But I want to take us, and I've not mentioned this until now, but I think we've got to go back to Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov, that brilliant, brilliant text of 1880. Think about your dates here. Of 1880. And you'll remember in that famous Grand Inquisitor scene, we've given a full lecture on this at learnstrong.net if you wish to go and run it to ground. You'll remember at the very end, the Christ figure never says anything, but at the very end, all he does is he kisses the bloodless lips of the Inquisitor as he leaves and goes into the darkness. And what is it that the Grand Inquisitor says? Go and never return. I think it's a compelling read in relationship to a poem like this. Finally, at 3B, how are we going to own a poem like this? Well, do you think in the end this is America's greatest gift? Our ability for reconciliation, our ability to move beyond times of great anger and resentment. And then finally, what was a time in your life when you had to forgive and move on? And how did you do that? And how can you continue to do that? I hope Whitman is challenging us to think about that question. Thank you.